Imagine expanding your team's abilities without adding headcount. With Element 451, AI assistants like admissions advisors and student success coaches work alongside your staff to deliver personalized experiences at scale, offer round the clock support, and uncover data driven insights. It's not just about doing more, it's about doing it smarter. Elevate your team with an AI workforce that delivers personalized, scalable, and impactful experiences across the student lifecycle. Learn more at element451.com. Welcome to the Hired Geek Podcast, where each week we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experiences. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. The Hired Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Podcast Network, a robust collection of shows designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Hired Geek Podcast, episode number 278, with Scott Anderberg, CEO at Moodle. So this is a really interesting conversation for me, learning more about their open source learning management system that I've known of for a long time, but didn't really know kind of the philosophy that was sort of baked into that platform. And so I learned a lot and really appreciate his perspective around their platform's global reach and just the community they have around this open source platform and how they kind of elevate what they're doing through that sort of network approach of users kind of coming together and really making an impact on that tool. So really appreciate Scott's time. He has a great background, kind of just largely in digital education and now helping to lead Moodle. So hear more about his story and what Moodle's up to in this episode, which I appreciate you so much for listening to this episode number 278 with Scott Anderberg. I'm excited for our conversation today. I will be learning as much, I think, as our audience. Just where for me, I've known of Moodle as a edtech platform for a long time, but I've not had the opportunity to kind of talk with somebody from that organization to talk more about what they do and kind of how it relates to sort of this moment in higher ed, especially. So excited, Scott, for you to be joining us. And if you want to briefly introduce yourself and your story as it relates to your journey at Moodle, and get us to talk a little bit about what Moodle does.
Thanks for the opportunity, Dustin. So my journey towards Moodle probably really starts with my own experience in university. I found university to be a very transformative period of time. It was an opportunity to really expand my thinking, and along with that came a huge expansiveness in terms of the way I saw the world. I came out of university really excited about the learning process and the ideas that I had and enthusiastic. But it was also at university that I was introduced to the world of EdTech because it was just at the beginning of online learning platforms. And so by the time I graduated, I'd been operating as a teaching assistant to one of the professors in the program. And so I was working in an LMS as a TA. And when I graduated, I was given a tip that company, eCollege, at the time was looking for talent. And I just happened to be headed to Denver after I graduated. So I popped in there. And so the first job I had after finishing college was working at the help desk at eCollege. And so I moved in to start on student and instructor support and spent about 8 years at eCollege back in the early days of e-learning in the U.S. eCollege was ultimately acquired by Pearson, and with that acquisition, I had the opportunity, after having worked through a whole range of different positions, including support, product, sales, account management, to take up an international post and work in a market development role. And that opportunity ultimately turned into what has been the last 15-year journey of bouncing around the world. It's led to the opportunity to live and work in the UK and in Australia. One period of time we did 5 international moves in a period of 10 years. So it's been an awful lot of movement, but there's been a lot of exposure and a lot of experience in all of that. And one of the things I had the opportunity to see as I moved across a lot of the developing world at that time was just firsthand how significantly the lack of access to high quality education creates suppression in those communities and societies. And it has been that realization that has driven the through line for the rest of my career. I've been really, really interested in what can we do to better create access to high quality education in communities where it's not currently available, and for me, all of that has been in the higher education sector. So when this opportunity with Moodle came along, it was a very, very natural fit. This is a platform that, as you say, has been around for a long time and is the most widely used LMS on the planet. So I can hardly think of a company where access is more central to what it's doing, particularly as an open source platform. So I've now been at Moodle for just a little over a year. It's been about 15 months. It's been a huge learning journey for me. You said you have as much to learn as your listeners, but I'll tell you, if there's anybody who has a lot left to learn, it's me as I continue this journey in with Moodle and the rest of the community.
Yeah, that's great. But we're getting like a fresh perspective, from you, and talking more about Moodle and its place in kind of the higher ed tech world and everything. So I think, I've always kind of known of it because it can obviously easily distinguish itself as sort of, an open source platform and stuff. And I guess, being able to appreciate that, with that, I'm sure being a crucial ingredient that is a, very readily adopted and utilized platform all over the world, whereas, others may be used like here in the US or wherever else. But I guess just expand on that, that idea of what differentiates and kind of distinguishes Moodle and its place in the broader higher ed tech world.
So Moodle has been around for 25 years, just a little more than 25 years at this point. Martin Dougiamas was the founder, and Martin is still with us at Moodle. He's now running our research organization, spending an awful lot of time thinking about trends in developing technology. I know I expect we'll probably talk a little bit about AI later, and he is front and center to the research that we're doing around AI. But when he developed Moodle, it was intended initially just to be an open source project that provided an alternative to the closed proprietary systems available to higher education institutions. And Martin did such a great job that it was a very legitimate alternative. In fact, in many cases, it was a superior alternative. And that's the reason that there's been so much proliferation of the platform. What that means today is that it is the most widely used LMS in the world. We have 430 million registered users on the platform. And what that means is there are an awful lot more out there than the ones that are registered. So we think from a lot of the data collection that we're doing that the registered users represent about a third of what's on the platform. So it's not inconceivable to think that there's somewhere close to 1 billion users on Moodle right now. I talked about access before. It's cultivated a huge global community, and that's one of the key differentiators. As an open source project, and that open source project remaining at the heart of Moodle, it's surrounded by a community of very, very passionate educators and technologists, many of whom are responsible for Moodle becoming what it is today, because so many developers around the world have given their own time and talent to provide code that has been added to core, or they have provided extensions or plugins that create the kind of customization and extensibility that Moodle can provide for organizations. And as a result, Moodle is a platform that has more capability than any other LMS on the market. Out of the box, it can do more than any other platform, and it provides the greatest level of customization, extensibility, and interoperability than any other platform can. So what that really means is that for either teachers or institutions, it has the ability to highlight those things that are unique about your educational approach in a way that no other platform can do. So it can really be a differentiator in ways that other technology can't.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think just that community of kind of collaborators and folks that are contributing and everything, that is like certainly super unique. And I think, I know, just to expand on that open source piece of that being just obviously like a really like a banner that you can fly, very prominent and just sort of simple to be like, we're an open source element, like be like, oh, okay, yeah, that's different than like the other things that I'm aware of, Correct me if I'm wrong. Like my sort of approximation of that and its value is the idea of like other platforms, like as great as they can be, are kind of like rigid and not like adaptable, and you have to sometimes just kind of really need to like smush it into like your context and try to like fit their parameters versus like having the ability to, mold and contour something to fit more what you're looking for. So I guess like, is that a correct assumption on my part? And if you can just talk more about why being open source is so important, and like, especially if it's like kind of, more important now than it has been in the past for any reason.
The short answer is yes. Your articulation of that is really accurate. We think one of the most important aspects of getting to use Moodle is that Moodle changes to meet the way that you teach or administer your institution. And we have partners and technologists and service providers all over the world that can help organizations do that. So you can specifically have the platform that you want to have. Like I said, right out of the box, without any of that, it does more than any other platform can, but to take that power and then customize it specifically to the things that you want to deliver is an incredibly important thing, and allows organizations to really differentiate the learning experiences that they want to offer to their students. That's one of the really important parts of open source, is that customization. The fact that that community is there supporting it is an unbelievably unique thing. I have not been involved in anything else in my career in higher education that looks like the kind of ecosystem that Moodle sits in, with commercial organizations, developers, academics, both teachers and administrators, all really interested in collaborating in a way that advances high quality and creative learning experiences. And that is a really, really exciting thing to get to be a part of. There's some really fundamental technical aspects of why open source is important. We want to make sure that we are in a position where we're offering as much creativity to organizations as possible. We want to make sure that there's high levels of transportability. So if you decide to move your platform from one place to another, or you want to change service providers on that platform, it's much more flexible in terms of those choices. We don't want an institution to feel hostage in the ways that they might with closed systems. And we want organizations not to be limited in their ambitions by the constraints that are around the platform. And open source really provides that. I'm actually fairly new to open source. In fact, I'm really new to open source. The rest of my career was not in the open source world. And so it's been an exciting part of the learning journey I've been on. And so in addition to some of those technical things, there are three things that have really jumped out that are much more ideological, that I have really enjoyed underpin open source, or at least they're the things that I'm coming to find underpinned it for in my learning experience so far. And the first is that I think open source, in its very nature, facilitates inclusivity, because it is available for anyone to access. It means that it's available for anyone to use. So anybody that wants to gets to play, not only in the delivery and the participation, but in the development and the contribution, which is a really cool piece of what we do. It's why actually that community becomes such an organic thing, because there are no barriers to anybody who wants to participate getting to do so. The second is that it encourages diversity, because anybody can play and because it's available anywhere. That means by its very nature, the individuals that are coming to participate come from a really wide background, both a background of nationality and ethnic backgrounds, cultural norms, socioeconomic strata in the population. And as a result, the diversity of thinking that comes into those contributions is really wide. And what that means is we have the opportunity to create something that's far more likely to meet the needs of a wide range of organizations and students, because you have those contributions coming from the same kinds of individuals. And lastly, because of that, it really fosters creativity. And that's been really, really cool to see. The kind of solutions that come into the platform, the ideas for enhancement, the extensions that are built are far, far wider and more interesting than if we kept all of that centralized within our own product organization. And so that creativity creates far richer learning experiences for students than we could ever do through a single organization, limiting those contributions from inside the group.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting thing that I've seen, getting better acquainted with just like the whole spectrum of different providers and platforms and all the different kind of use cases and things. And, with kind of like, an LMS being one of the kind of core platforms now, that idea of like, it's not inaccurate, but like that idea of felt hostage by like, a provider of a core system that feels like it's really hard to break up with or whatever. And certainly that idea of like, that you're kind of, I guess for another powerful metaphor, like you feel like you're a prisoner to just sort of like their parameters and that sort of thing. Like that certain platforms maybe have this opportunity for customization, but require so much knowledge or time and resources to do that. Like they sort of, position themselves as like, well, we do have all this functionality that you can, leverage and harness, but it takes so much work to kind of like get there. And I think that being this kind of unfortunate realization that some people get to, or, that there is sometimes where it's like, well, it is what it is and you can't really do anything about it. So then you have to kind of like try to, fit within their walls and stuff. But so I think just like being curious to see how that kind of shakes out, I guess, just as like, certainly something like AI comes in the scene and just I think is another kind of disruptor just generally in kind of the digital transformation that's happening for institutions. But I think if nothing else, that is a reason why something like open source in all its sort of shapes and forms has been persistent is because like there's sometimes this sort of like sobering realization of like, oh, cool. Like the idea of something like Salesforce, like an amazing tool and platform, it can do so many things, but like it takes a lot to like harness that and like, leverage it and make it to be what it can be or should be for you. And I think unfortunately sometimes that like how it's sold is like you can make it be whatever you want it to be or do whatever you want to do. But like you mentioned AI. Again, that's sort of a disruptor, I think, just generally, like I said, and, it's helping both individuals and organizations do more, do better, like all those sort of things. So I'm curious in the context of Moodle, you mentioned, I guess, like some research, and like things going on, looking into AI, how do you see, like, how are you and how do you see AI impacting your work?
You said it, AI is likely to change almost everything about the way we think about education. And we are anticipating that's likely to be the case. But I think we are approaching it from the assumption that we don't really know how yet. Like it will change everything, but what capabilities within AI are going to be the most impactful in education? And what are the ways that students are most likely to find it useful? And what are the things that are going to be the most beneficial to institutions? That has yet to play out. The capabilities that we're seeing from AI are amazing, but they're still young. They're still new. And so we have taken a very intentional approach in making an AI subsystem available in our most recent major release so that anyone in the Moodle community can begin to participate in answering those questions. What's most important in AI? And they can answer it importantly within the context of their own learning environment, both where they sit culturally in terms of the audience that they're trying to serve, in terms of those things they want to highlight in their learning experiences, but also really importantly within the context of the constraints that they have to think about as it relates to AI. AI comes with a huge set of variables in terms of what's possible, both in terms of access to the underlying technology, the expense that it takes to power it, the ability to link into the different backends. And by putting a subsystem in there, those institutions at a very individualized level can begin to leverage that. And what we can do is work with those organizations around the world to start to answer some of those questions. What's most useful? What's most impactful? And how is it best utilized to advance the outcomes of students? We have some ideas about where we're going to see that happen, and we're already seeing that happen in certain places. Things like AI as admin support. It's going to be revolutionary in terms of the content creation and curation capabilities, in terms of the way that it can help organize overall courses and material and think about the workflow of moving through it. Those are going to be a huge change, which are ultimately admin functions to reduce a lot of the manual overhead that are not specialized instructional work from teachers and administrators, and get them doing much higher value work. We're seeing AI used across a lot of platforms and in a lot of environments already in a coaching capacity. So how does it operate alongside a student, not as a teacher, but as someone that can actually help insert interesting and important questions at the right time, or make links between various pieces of content that might not otherwise have been obvious, so that students have that support. But as it does that, I think the most important thing it's going to do in the short term is actually work as an ability to improve the mediation in the relationships between students and teachers. Of all the teachers I talk to about AI, none of them have talked to me about it as if it's a threat, an existential threat to them. They do not see AI as something that's coming in to replace teachers, because they see their primary job as building meaningful relationships with students as a means to help provide insight on the content that's being accessed through various ways. And all of them have told me the biggest barrier to that are these admin tasks that could easily be picked up by AI. So I think the biggest benefit in the short term is going to be to get us to a place where those teachers can do the best of their work most of the time.
AI powered and people focused. This is the future of higher ed. Join us in Charlotte, June 24th through 25th for the 2025 Engage Summit. Learn how AI transforms student engagement by blending scalability with authenticity. Enrollify listeners get $50 off registration with code Enrollify50. Register now at engage.element451.com. Like, that's the vibe. Thankfully, I think that's a great place to be, and like that's what people are saying, and what other people are building is like, exactly those things, and I really appreciate that. And I think as long as we keep all sort of reinforcing that notion and like kind of optimizing that, I think we can get that to be like really, really effective and really impactful for everyone. Certainly just that idea, like you said, like teachers can kind of be best positioned for success in doing the meaningful work that they do, and that students can really get as much as they can, get the most out of their learning experiences and everything. I think we're at a place where like the disruption is less about like replacing, certainly not anything that's like really meaningful or worthwhile. Like it's supplementing in the sense of like and kind of augmenting, and they just like kind of getting menial or sort of tedious tasks and things out of the way. So it's just really exciting. I think it's just the idea of like if we keep that as our North Star, it's like, because I guess I'll admit like saying this I guess is maybe a little naive, but like we're the ones building these tools and doing all the things. So like if we sort of put the guardrails in place of really keeping that sort of notion of exactly what you're saying in place, I think it's like, as far as education goes, I think we'll be in a pretty good place. Like, you certainly can't speak for, anything else, but I think just educators, leveraging these tools that are out there in a very thoughtful and intentional way to keep kind of humans at the center. Really exciting to know that, you all are kind of looking into that as well.
I think we have to acknowledge as a global education community, AI has to be part of the future. If you look at the emerging demand for education around the world and forecast that forward into the next decade, we do not and cannot produce enough teachers to meet that demand under the current delivery system. And so AI has to be leveraged as a means of creating capacity and scale in the resources that we have. So it is important, yes, that we recognize we have to keep humans at the center, but it is just as important to recognize that we don't have enough humans to stay at the center if we don't properly leverage this technology to scale and meet that demand in the first place.
Well said. I appreciate you saying that, because that's almost like, that's like the next tier, because I think at the just very baseline, that idea of like trying to dissuade people's like fear or reticence or being like, we don't need to do anything with it, like just, ban it or whatever. It's like, well, how about we consider that it could be this enabler of, not just like you said, like high quality teaching and learning and student experiences, but like, continue on, and build upon so much progress that has been happening over the past, several years, past couple of decades, I'd say, of like, creating so much more access just through like, certainly like your background, the just kind of expansion of digital education portfolios at institutions all over the world. It's like, cool. Well, I feel like we're kind of like starting to hit the limits of that, because it's like, well, even still, we don't want to just have like, for programs and stuff that have like live sessions and stuff. It's like, well, there's kind of limitations of that or whatever, but it's just like, well, if we try to like, we've built to this point, now bring in this completely new sort of catalyst that could, like you said, just really enable, great teachers to do more and do better. I think AI is a good ingredient for that. And then, certainly just with what you all are doing with Moodle, like have that all live within, a nice kind of home and platform and ecosystem and everything. So
we talked about inclusivity as one of those things that I see as open source doing. And I think that's great. Talked about the importance of access. I think if we're going to be honest with ourselves about access and inclusivity, and we really think about that at a global scale, we have to recognize that without something to support the human infrastructure, we are going to intentionally be excluding and reducing access to education to some of the most difficult parts of the planet, some of the places that have been hardest to get education for the longest time. And this has to be part of the solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think you kind of answered a little bit of this next question, but I'll just give you the opportunity if there's like any other, AI is obviously like the big trend. So I always kind of point that out as sort of, something to really grapple with and interface with. But like any other just kind of broader trends that are going on right now that you see kind of impactful for your work in particular?
Yeah. So, I mean, when this question comes up, AI is always the top one on the list to talk about, and we've done that already. But there's also a huge trend, especially in the context of higher education, especially in terms of the increasing scrutiny of the value of a higher education degree as it relates to employability. And I think I think it's an important set of questions. I think that when students set out to get a degree, almost all of them are doing so because they've got their eyes on a future that requires that degree for their earning capability and the progress that they can make in society and the life they can build for themselves and their family. But it is getting harder and harder based on the data to validate whether that's going to be the case. And so that link between educational value and employability is a big one. I think we have the potential to play a really interesting role there because we operate across the higher education landscape, but also provide learning management solutions across a huge population in the corporate, government, nonprofit spaces. The ability to be a broker of some kind in helping to connect those organizations to each other and to begin to work with them on the kind of validation that goes into that is a really exciting potential area for us to operate in. I mean, at a very basic level, just simply having relationships across so many sectors in a community like Moodle that is so well connected creates opportunities for us that are really exciting and interesting. So, we're evaluating what kind of a role can we play there that specifically serves the student as they move through that journey and is beneficial both to the educational institution, but also to the potential employment institutions down the road. The other thing that I think is very current is that there is significant budget pressure on higher education institutions in almost every market. And it's looking like that pressure is going to get more intense over the course of the next 3 or 4 years. And budget pressure is a pretty good thing for open source products. We can provide highly creative, highly customizable solutions far more affordably than the proprietary alternatives that are out there. And so I think the budget pressure is one that's a really important trend because I think we can respond to help institutions in ways that other organizations and solutions will struggle to do.
Appreciate sort of the mention of like the broader like workforce development stuff, the idea that people like, and this has been just sort of a paradigm shift of like acknowledging and embracing versus I think like bristling at the notion that students pursue higher education to be gainfully employed, in whatever they're doing. So like that idea of like, okay, we're accepting that, we're adapting and kind of adopting that. And the idea that like the scrutiny on value and relevance and everything, like it shouldn't just be around dollars and cents and everything. Like it should be a part of that intentionality and thoughtfulness on decision making, like, certainly on even like the tools that we're using, like how is this elevating the experience kind of holistically for a student so that they're, learning as much as they can, they're connecting with their fellow students, like how is it facilitating all these things that sort of bake into this being a valuable use of, the time and resources of the student and their family, like all the kind of stuff. So like that idea of just being like, yeah, we'd want to be leveraging like, an LMS that is, enabling that as much as kind of any and all other ed tech tools and everything. And, I think just even like also with what you're saying around just like, I'm always excited about like, and I think it's been sort of burgeoning or sort of simmering or, like the kind of the network approaches, that idea of like that you have a great community or whatever, like how do we, try to bring more people together more consistently to be more collaborative. And certainly higher education is just really great at that, at kind of doing the show and tell and kind of, sharing best practices or any of that kind of stuff integrated into our daily lives and everything, just like whether it, it's people coming together because they all love Moodle and use it and are a part of the open source community or just like anything else. I think just that idea of like trying to leverage kind of, networks to elevate our work, find efficiencies and different things like that. And, so yeah, I'm just very excited for all that. But I think as we wrap up, I'll give you the final word. Always like to try to get, the advice from folks that we're talking to on the show here, advice just for other higher ed leaders right now. We're in kind of it's choppy waters, it's turbulent, it's ambiguous. There's sort of foggy, kind of weather that we're going through here, but we're pushing through, going onward. what advice do you have for higher ed leaders right now?
So like I said, I've been with Moodle now for about 15 months, which is still really, really fresh. And one of the things I did not expect when I took this job was to get asked this question for advice as frequently as I have. And so I'm quite cautious in providing advice, but I might, if I think about this, I think I would have some things that I would say are maybe an encouragement to offer on the basis of my own experience and what I am seeing in the market right now. I said at the beginning of our discussion that higher education was transformative for me. And I think I want to just say to everybody that is an educator out there that transformative power is timeless. And what you are all doing is important, and that it's changing the world. So don't give up on the fact that power is real and present, and don't lose sight of that. The second is for all I said about this notion of students pursuing education, oftentimes for gainful employment and the kind of progress that they see. Part of the reason that university was transformative for me is because the ideas in liberal arts matter. There's a lot about liberal arts education itself that's under deep scrutiny right now because that is the thing that's hardest to link to that kind of gainful employment piece. But it's really a mistake to think that you can remove that kind of education from curriculum and see the same kind of outcomes on those things that are easier to link. I would really encourage educators everywhere to hold really tight to those principles and values of liberal arts education. They are important and they matter for students here and everywhere around the world. And the last thing I would say is I think that it's important to remember that at its heart, education is a relational endeavor. I think that we need to be focused on building bridges with the people inside and outside of institutions and across departments and outside the classroom and across research projects, and that it is really important that we remember that we learn best when we learn together.
Great advice all around, and I think great things to help, I think ground us, inspire us, motivate us, and I just appreciate you, all that you've shared, all that Moodle and your team there is doing, and just really great to have you on the podcast here to kind of give your perspective and kind of again help teach me more about your all's approach and everything. We'll have ways to connect with you and Moodle in the show notes. But just thank you so much for your time and for sharing all that you did.
My pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity, Dustin.
The Higher Ed Geek podcast is a part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances you'll like all the other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing constantly, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help you find your next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your host. Learn from people like Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Day Kibbolds, and Eddie Francis, as well as so many other of your favorite leaders in higher education. Enrollify is made possible by the support of Element 451, a leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.